thought I was just helping with bills. I didn't know I was erasing myself. It was a cool October evening in Minneapolis, the kind where the wind brushes leaves against the sidewalk, like whispers from seasons past. Claire Morgan parked her car in front of the modest beige house she had helped her parents refinance 3 years ago. The porch light flickered above the doorframe, casting long shadows across the lawn. Inside, the smell of roasted beef and garlic bread drifted through the air. Familiar, comforting. Almost enough to pretend nothing had changed. Claire, 36, was used to being the responsible one. As the eldest of 3, she'd stepped up without being asked. She was a financial supervisor at a mid-sized logistics firm downtown. Never married, no children, not because she didn't want them, but because life had unfolded in practical terms. Her parents, Robert and Elaine Morgan, had leaned on her for years. Medical bills, home repairs, tuition for her younger brothers, Brandon and Chase. She had wired money so often it had become a reflex like breathing. Dinner was already on the table when she walked in. Her mother greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. While her father nodded from the head of the table, Brandon and Chase were mid-conversation. About a failed business idea, something involving crypto, Claire vaguely registered. They all sat down, said Grace. Passed the dishes around. Claire made light conversation, laughed when prompted, and listened more than she spoke. The rhythm was familiar. She had long ago learned her place in this dynamic, steady, supportive silence. After dinner, Claire offered to help clean up. While gathering some plates from the dining table, she noticed a manila envelope peeking out from under a stack of magazines near the buffet. It was labeled Will and Estate, Final Copies. She hesitated. She didn't mean to pry, or maybe a part of her did. But Claire had been the one managing their bills, arranging their insurance, handling paperwork, since her mother had a brief health scare last year. It was second nature now. She picked up the envelope without thinking, just a quick glance to make sure everything was in order. She told herself. She pulled out the contents and began to read. As her eyes moved down the page, her fingers tightened. The house, the vacation condo in Naples, Florida, their remaining savings, all were designated to Brandon and Chase. Not jointly equally. Between the two of them, Claire's name wasn't there. Only a single hollow sentence at the bottom. We love all our children. The floor seemed to shift beneath her. She blinked, reread, waited for her name to appear somewhere in the fine print. It didn't. She checked the envelope, the table, even the backs of the pages, nothing. Her breath caught in her throat. A strange, distant ringing filled her ears as she tried to anchor herself. Was this a mistake? An old draft? She carried the papers into the kitchen, her movements deliberate, calm on the surface. "Mom?" she asked, unfolding the sheets slightly. "I just saw this. Is it real?" Elaine dried a dish with her back turned. "Oh, you weren't supposed to see that yet, but it's real." A pause. Then a quiet yes. Claire turned to her father, who was rinsing a casserole dish. "Dad," he cleared his throat. "You're doing fine, Claire. You have a great job. No debt. Your brothers, well, they're still figuring things out." Her heart splintered, not in some explosive, dramatic way, but in small, piercing cracks that ran deep. Brandon had dropped out of college twice. Chase had gone through 3 jobs in the past 5 years. Claire had covered for both quietly, efficiently. When Chase needed $3,000 for a car down payment, she sent it. When Brandon couldn't cover rent, she had Venmo'd it over without a second thought. "I wasn't doing it to get into a will," Claire said, her voice steady, despite the turmoil in her chest. "But I also didn't expect to be completely erased." Elaine turned then, towel in hand, eyes already misted. "We thought you'd understand. You're the strong one. So that means I don't matter." Silence. No one said it, but no one denied it. She nodded slowly. There was nothing left to argue. No apology that would feel sincere. No explanation that would undo the choice they had consciously made. Claire walked back to the living room. Her coat was still draped over the chair near the door. She slipped it on. The soft wool fabric felt heavier than usual. She didn't slam anything, didn't yell. There was no dramatic scene to be made. That wasn't Claire's way. Her brothers were still on the couch, one scrolling on his phone, the other laughing at something on the TV. Neither looked up. She opened the front door. The night had grown colder. A breeze swept in, rustling the papers, still resting on the table. The smell of roasted beef lingered, oddly sour now. She stepped outside. No one followed. The door clicked shut behind her. She stood on the porch for a moment, watching her breath curl into the dark. She felt no rage, no desperation. Just a quiet, aching emptiness that wrapped around her like a coat she didn't ask for. And somehow, for the first time in years, that emptiness felt honest. They forgot me in writing, but remembered me when the bills came. That sentence echoed in Claire's mind as she stirred her coffee in the quiet of her apartment kitchen. 2 weeks had passed since that night, the night when she found the paper that erased her. The air in Minneapolis had grown colder, and the rustle of autumn leaves had started giving way to the first bite of winter wind. But inside her apartment, it was warm. Peaceful, undisturbed. No one had called. No one had shown up. Her phone remained silent, her inbox empty. Not a single apology, not even a passive-aggressive follow-up. Just silence. Claire kept her days filled commuting to work at the financial firm, sipping ginger tea while reviewing spreadsheets, coming home to the soft hum of music, her scented candle flickering beside a stack of novels she now had time to read. From the outside, it looked like balance. From the inside, it was survival. But beneath the rhythm of her new quiet, the ache remained. A dull, pulsing emptiness, not born of longing, but of betrayal. She had never asked for gratitude, only to matter. On a Thursday evening, while she was chopping carrots for soup, her phone buzzed. "Mortgage is due this Friday. Can you send it, Dad?" Claire's hands paused over the cutting board. She stared at the message like it was from a stranger. There was no "Hi, Claire," no "How have you been?" Just a demand. As if nothing had changed. As if she hadn't walked away from a dinner table that dismissed her entire existence. 2 minutes later, another ping. "Claire, you shouldn't be doing this. We need to talk, Mom." Her fingers hovered above the phone. This. What exactly was this? Choosing not to be used? Refusing to play the invisible provider? Still not one word about the will? Not one attempt to explain why their daughter, the one who paid their bills, covered Brandon's failed ventures, helped Chase get through community college, was written out of the family's future with a hollow sentence. "We love all our children." Love, it seemed, had a price tag. Claire opened her banking app. The familiar list of auto payments loaded $400 to her parents' mortgage, $300 to Chase's phone and car insurance, $600 every other month to Brandon's freelance fund. It had all been routine, so normal that even she had stopped questioning it, but not tonight. She clicked into each entry, her fingers steady, breath slow. One by one she canceled them. Confirm, confirm, confirm. The app displayed the message she hadn't known she needed to see. All recurring payments successfully canceled. She placed the phone down and exhaled slowly, letting her shoulders sink. Then she replied, "I didn't cut anything. I just stopped paying." No anger. No long explanation, just the truth. She returned to her carrots, diced them cleanly, and let the pot simmer while outside the city moved on. For the next few days, silence reigned. At work, Claire dove into her responsibilities with precision and calm. Her supervisor even complimented her. "You seem lighter lately, more grounded." Claire just smiled. But each night, she'd glance at her phone before bed. Not because she hoped for a message, but because she expected the shift. People like her family didn't disappear when the money stopped. They just waited until they needed something else. And exactly 1 week later, her prediction came true. It started subtly. A voicemail from her father's number, short-clipped, but tinged with discomfort. "Hey, just wondering if something's up. Let us know." She deleted it without listening to the rest. Then came an email from Chase. "Did you forget about the car insurance? They sent me a late fee notice." Followed by a text from Brandon. "Mom's worried. She says the power bill came back unpaid." "You all right?" Claire didn't answer. She wasn't in the mood to teach grown adults how to open a utility bill or call a bank, not anymore. That Saturday, as she walked back from the co-op grocery store with a canvas bag of produce, her phone buzzed again. It was her mother. "You're really going to let the mortgage lapse? After all we've built together?" Claire paused in front of her apartment building, snow crunching softly under her boots. She looked up at the gray Minnesota sky and realized something. They hadn't built anything together. She had built their safety. She had laid every invisible brick, and now that she was no longer the scaffolding, the house was shaking. Inside, she warmed her hands on a mug of tea and sat in silence. No music, no distractions. Just her and the growing clarity. They didn't miss her. They missed her payments. Claire had once believed her role in the family was natural, expected of the eldest, the responsible one. But now she saw it for what it was, a role of convenience, a ghost they summoned when the bills came due. But she was done haunting their comfort. That night, she opened her laptop and began sketching a new budget one that included a vacation to Arizona in the spring weekend photography classes and a monthly deposit into her savings. It was modest, but it was hers. She closed the screen, folded her hands in her lap, and let the quiet fill her apartment. No drama, no shouting, just absence and peace. When warmth disappears, truth surfaces, and suddenly so do they. It was mid-December in Minneapolis. The city had entered its first serious freeze of the season. The kind that turned door handles brittle and made even the streetlights look like they were shivering. Claire's apartment was a warm refuge. Quiet jazz in the background, the scent of lentil stew filling the air, and a thick gray sweater wrapped around her like armor. She had gotten good at silence, better perhaps than she'd ever been at speaking up. No news from her parents, no texts from her brothers, just a week of glorious quiet since she stopped all payments. Then it started. The first message came in the morning right after she finished brewing coffee. From Mom. "Claire, the furnace is acting up again. Can you check it when you get a chance?" Claire stared at the screen for a moment. Check it as if she were still the designated fix-it-all. The family's on-call bank and handyman. Then another ping. From Samantha. "You're being childish. This is what teenagers do when they're mad, not grown women." Samantha was her cousin, but more like a family spokesperson at this point. She always inserted herself when drama brewed. By lunch, there was a voicemail from Dad. "Claire, it's cold here. Your mom's not feeling great. Just, give us a call." "Okay." He sounded tired, maybe even a little ashamed, but there was no apology, no acknowledgement, just veiled urgency. That evening, Claire got the call that truly cracked the mask. It wasn't from her family. It was from the gas company. "Hi, Ms. Morgan. We're calling about the service account for 304 Westfield Lane. You're still listed as the primary payer. The account is overdue and at risk of disconnection. Would you like to renew your plan or change billing responsibility?" Claire felt her breath catch. Her hands tightened around the phone. They hadn't just expected her help. They had left the entire infrastructure of the house, utilities, mortgage, insurance, in her name, even after cutting her out of their will, even after never calling. Even now, they hadn't lifted a finger to transfer responsibility. It wasn't just about dependency anymore. It was entitlement, dressed as ignorance. "I'm no longer responsible for that property," Claire replied calmly. "Please remove my name from the account." "Yes, ma'am. We'll send an authorization form." She hung up and let the silence stretch. The heater purred in the corner. Outside, snow was drifting slowly across the balcony. For the first time in years, she realized she had fully stepped out of their shadow. This wasn't a moment of rage. It was a moment of release. She picked up her phone again, not to scroll or wait for another excuse-filled message, but to write back just once. To Dad. "I'm not coming back to fix things. I didn't cut you off. I simply stopped paying. You'll need to figure the rest out on your own." There was no immediate reply. No explosion, just silence. And for the next few days, it stayed that way. Claire cooked her meals, walked through fresh snow in the park, took her camera out for the first time in months. Her life began to take shape again, not around obligation, but around choice. And yet in the quiet, She knew what was coming. Not everyone handles consequences with dignity. And when people who depend on you start falling, they don't always accept the fall as their own fault. They reach, they grab, they blame. Claire stood by the window as a snowstorm rolled in thick flakes, swirling like tiny ghosts. She cupped a mug of cocoa in her hands and watched the world blur behind a curtain of white. Inside her apartment, everything was calm, but outside, she could already hear it coming. The storm they would bring, when their comfort finally cracked. And this time, she wasn't going to open the door. They didn't come to make things right. They came because they had run out of choices. It was December 23rd. Snow clung to every rooftop in Minneapolis, like a worn quilt pulled tight over the city. Inside Claire's apartment, golden light bathed the walls, the scent of gingerbread and cinnamon rolls drifted through the air. A soft vinyl crackle accompanied a slow jazz record spinning in the corner. She was icing sugar cookies one by one, humming under her breath. For once, Christmas didn't feel like a performance. There were no rushed mall trips for last-minute gifts, no bank transfers disguised as holiday help. Just quiet and peace, and her own two hands. Then came the knock. Firm. Not frantic, but not casual either. She froze spatula mid-air. No one visited unannounced, especially not in a snowstorm. When she opened the door, her father was standing there. A thick wool coat draped over his shoulders, half dusted in snow. His cheeks were flushed from the cold, but his eyes, they looked different. Not angry, not proud, just cornered. "Claire," he said, his breath forming clouds. "Your mother's sick. She's been running a fever since yesterday. Samantha took off 2 nights ago. The house is freezing." He looked over her shoulder into the warm, glowing space behind her. "We need your help." She didn't speak right away. She simply leaned against the doorframe, steadying her breath. "You're asking me to fix the house," she said. Again, he didn't argue. She didn't yell. Didn't ask him how he could show up now after weeks of silence and years of using her like an invisible scaffold. Instead, she said calmly, "I didn't cut anything off. I just stopped paying for what's not mine." He flinched, not dramatically, but like someone hearing the truth too clearly. There was a long pause, the kind that makes people fidget. Then he exhaled and looked down at his boots. "We've sold most of what we could," he admitted. "Your mom pawned the silverware set. Brandon tried to take out a loan and got denied. Chase is still between jobs. The house is barely hanging on. And she has mild pneumonia." Claire opened the door, but just a sliver, enough for him to see the interior, not to enter. Her small home was warm, calm, and alive. A small tree in the corner, lights soft and steady, a pot of soup on the stove. Nothing lavish, but everything in its place. She wanted him to see it, to understand. She didn't say, "Look what I built without you." She didn't have to. Her father's gaze drifted past her shoulder, scanning the neat living room. "I see you're doing okay," he said, almost more to himself than to her. Claire nodded. "I am." He didn't ask to come in. Didn't beg. He just stood there, letting the weight of his own choices wrap around him, like the cold. When he finally turned to leave, he didn't slam the stairs in frustration. He just walked slow, stiff, and silent back into the snow. She closed the door gently, not in defiance, not in anger, but in finality, and for the first time in her life. She didn't feel guilty for choosing herself. That night, Claire sat by the window with a cup of chamomile. The world outside was blanketed in white, a silence too deep for words. The heat in her apartment hummed low. Her lights flickered softly. There were no emergency texts, no midnight phone calls, just quiet. And as the minutes passed, she realized the cold outside didn't frighten her anymore. The only cold she had truly feared was the one that came with silence, wrapped in expectation, with love, conditional on sacrifice. Now that she had closed the door on that winter, finally felt pure, the door had clicked shut, and it would stay that way. They didn't knock to reconnect. They knocked because no one else answered. The first week of January arrived, like a glass of cold water thrown in the face. The snow had started to melt, but the air still bit through gloves and coats. Claire had settled back into a quiet rhythm. Her days were simple and fulfilling. Teaching photography part-time at the local arts center, finishing an online video editing course in the evenings, and putting a little money into savings each week. Her apartment, small but warm, had become her retreat. No more late-night calls, no more guilt, just her in peace. Then, on a gray Tuesday afternoon, her neighbor from across the hall knocked. "I didn't want to be nosy," the woman began, "but I saw someone from your old neighborhood at the grocery store. They said your parents' house is getting foreclosed. Next month, maybe sooner." Claire didn't blink. She simply nodded, thanked her neighbor, and closed the door. She had expected this. For years, she'd kept their household afloat. Mortgage, utilities, surprise emergencies, she'd covered it all. And when she stopped, she knew what would follow. She just didn't expect it so soon. That Friday they showed up, all three of them. Her mother looked thinner, more fragile than usual. Her father's shoulders had slumped in a way she'd never seen. And Samantha, her expression wasn't angry or smug. It was hollow. Claire opened the door but didn't invite them in. "We didn't know where else to go," her mother said, voice tight. "We don't know how to start over," her father added. "You were always the steady one." Then Samantha, barely meeting her eyes, murmured, "Can you help us talk to the bank?" Claire's hand rested on the edge of the door. Her breath didn't shake this time. She looked at each of them slowly, calmly. Once those faces would have stirred something in her duty guilt, the deep ache of wanting to be needed. But now, they stirred nothing but a firm, centered stillness. "I'm not saying no, because I can't help," she said clearly. "I'm saying no, because helping would mean none of you would learn a thing." Her mother flinched. Samantha looked down. Her father exhaled like he already knew it was coming. Claire stepped forward, not to close the door, but to stand in her own space, in her own light. "This didn't happen overnight," she said. "I've been carrying you all for years. You knew that. And when you had the chance to show me I mattered, you erased me instead." No one spoke, no defense, no argument. They just stood there, silent. Claire took one final look at them, not with anger or revenge, but with quiet acceptance. Then she stepped back and closed the door. It didn't slam, it simply clicked, and stayed that way. That night, she didn't cry, didn't check her phone for messages that wouldn't come. She made dinner, lit a candle, and opened her laptop to find an email from the Arts Center. A full-time teaching offer. A permanent role. Her hands didn't shake as she clicked accept. She wasn't waiting to be needed anymore. She wasn't hoping for approval. She was living for herself. The silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like freedom. Sometimes the silence that follows a hard decision isn't empty. It's a sign you've finally reclaimed your life. Claire's story reminds us, being the dependable one doesn't mean being disposable. She gave sacrificed, stayed quiet. Until one day, she chose herself, and in that choice, she didn't become cold, she became whole. If you've ever felt like the only one carrying the weight in your family, remember this? You have the right to stop, to step back, to be free. Because love without respect is not love. It's control. If this story spoke to something in you, leave a comment. Tell us, have you ever had to walk away to find your peace? And if you want more powerful, true-to-life stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Your support helps us keep sharing what matters most.